Movies go through a lot of changes during development. Groundbreaking statement, I'm aware. Ideas are added, cut out, and then added back in. And it's common for a film to come out in a state completely different from its original vision. The Cars franchise is no exception to this. Back when Pixar began working on the first film in 1997, it was originally titled The Little Yellow Car, and would have been about a little yellow car that becomes an outcast in his small town home due to him being an electric car. That's a video for another time though, because today I wanted to talk about Cars 3, which, much like the first film, originally had a very different plot than the movie we all saw in theaters, and nobody really seems to talk about it. The closest thing I could find was a Ned Wheeler video that briefly covered it, but even then he doesn't go very in-depth. So let's talk about the original version of Cars 3, everything Pixar's revealed about it, as well as stuff that's been leaked online, and piece them together in order to figure out what exactly this version of the movie would have been about. Like I mentioned a moment ago, this version of Cars 3 isn't talked about by a lot of people, and that includes Pixar themselves. If you check any of its home media or streaming releases, there's no footage, concept art, or even mentions of it, although they do have cut content from the final version. Instead, The Art of Cars 3, a book containing concept art as well as development info on the film, is one of the only places where we could find any official information on this version of the movie. The book has an introduction by Cars 3 production designers Bill Cohn and Jay Shuster. Sorry if I butchered that. And in it, they briefly talk about Cars 3's early development. In the early stages, we explored the potential of SoCal culture, incorporating car-sized skateboard parks, automotive high fashion expressed through wrap jobs, cosmetic bodywork, custom wheels and tires, and the appearance of celebrity cars at swank parties in the Hollywood Hills. This world was contrasted with the stark minimalism of a dry lake bed in the desert where cars raced for the sheer joy of speed. Over time, the story's focus shifted from one of identity theft, mingled with a budding mentorship story, into a more specific tale about an aging, mid-career athlete struggling to make a comeback from a crash after suffering through a series of losses to a younger generation of racers. The mentorship theme also came into focus as a key element, aligning McQueen's path with that of Doc Hudson's in the first film. Okay, so that gives us a lot of information to work with. The bulk of the film would have taken place in California and explored celebrity culture, as well as having a desert where cars race as a prominent location. We also know that the main focus of this version would have been on an identity theft storyline, rather than McQueen training to beat Jackson Storm, and that the mentorship between McQueen and Cruz, well, still there, wasn't as much of a focus. On the topic of Cruz, the book also talks about her personality and character traits, and how they kept changing during the making of the film on a later page by Cars 3 story artist Reg Bowerdages. Once again, sorry if I butchered that name. We usually explore many roads when we're developing our characters. For a brief period, she was even a different gender. Initially, Cruz was a fellow race car who McQueen meets at Sterling's racing facility. She was young, cocky, headstrong, and a very fast racer, not unlike McQueen was in the first Cars movie. We thought it would be interesting to pair McQueen off with a younger version of himself, allowing him to play into the frustration that Doc Hudson felt dealing with a brash, confident, and headstrong character. We soon found that this version of Cruz got in the way of a comeback story and was territory we had already done in the first movie. Cruz felt more interesting the more we gave her opposing traits. She slowly evolved into an awkward, unconventional trainer, a perfect foil for McQueen, who secretly has dreams to be a racer but lacks confidence. We found the more of an odd couple we made them, the more entertainment and conflict we could have with them. While this quote is referring to Cruz in the final version of the film, I doubt that she was any different from this cocky, headstrong version of the character described by Reg. In fact, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this version of Cruz was carried over from the early SoCal version of the movie. In addition to those two quotes, the book has concept art that shows what these SoCal areas might have looked like, where we get to see one of the celebrity cars that would have been in the film, that being the DeLorean from Back to the Future. We also get a look at the desert they were talking about, as well as some vehicles racing on it, which heavily reminds me of the Salt Fever episode of Cars on the Road. I wouldn't be surprised if the episode was based on it. That's all the book has to offer in terms of information on this early version of the movie, but there's still one more official source we have to cover, and that's Michael Wallace. Now, I bet you're wondering, who is Michael Wallace and what does he have to do with cars? Well, Wallace is a journalist and historian who's written nearly 20 books, including Route 66, The Mother Road. His work on that book would lead him to be contacted by Pixar when they were doing research for the first Cars, with him serving as a consultant on the film. He would even get to voice Sheriff in the movie, which is pretty cool. According to an August 2013 article by Route 66 News, an outlet specializing in stories along the Mother Road, Wallace confirmed that Cars 3 was in the works nearly a year before it was announced by Disney in March of 2014. This happened during a 25-minute interview on WGBZ Radio, which according to them is a station based in Alton, Illinois that I couldn't find any information about online outside of this article. I guess they're a very small local station. In addition to confirming Cars 3's existence, Wallace also said that Route 66 would have a major role in the film after getting the shaft in Cars 2, as well as Route 99, a highway that, similar to Route 66, ended up being bypassed by an interstate, with many of the places along the road becoming ghost towns. And with that, we have everything that's officially been revealed about this version of Cars 3. It's definitely a lot of information, don't get me wrong, but still not anything we could form a plot out of. Just breadcrumbs of what it would have had in it. If only we could have seen this version in action. I said, if only we could have seen this version in action. Yes, you read that title right. There's actually a scene from this version of the movie that's been leaked online. Well, I wouldn't say leaked, more so discovered. And it's all thanks to CoolCars95-YT, who posted a 3-part series on their channel dedicated to it. According to them, they were going through Google Images looking at car storyboards, which led them to come across this scene on the websites of a few storyboard artists who worked on Cars 3. Makes me wonder what other major lost media discoveries are just waiting to be found in artist portfolios. If I'm remembering correctly, a bunch of test animations for Shrek were found in a similar way. Back to the scene, it begins at a tourist attraction called the Wheel of Love, where we see someone dressed up as Lightning McQueen getting a picture with the tourist, before Cruz and the actual McQueen blast right past them. The two are being chased by the police for some unknown reason. Cruz is having the time of her life, while McQueen is scared for his life. They quickly evade the cops and decide to escape onto a highway, only for it to be covered in traffic. Cruz decides to weave her way past all the cars, with Lightning trying to as well, only to be blocked off by the other cars who don't want to get cut in line again. However, immediately after that, a warning appears on a sign showing pictures of McQueen and Cruz all roughed up, saying that the two are dangerous and must be avoided at all costs. This one shot means a lot, but I still want to talk about the rest of the storyboards before I explain what it means. The sign causes the other cars on the highway to get scared and decide to give Lightning an opening to escape. Let's gotta be gore in this universe, right? The chase continues, with helicopters dropping speed traps out of the air to pop their tires, and McQueen and Cruz jumping off a ramp to escape. They eventually make it back into the city again, before deciding to head onto yet another crowded highway. It's at this point we see a sign with a bunch of different places listed on it, with one of those being Hollywood, confirming that this scene is from the early SoCal version of the movie. The two start driving on the shoulder of the road, before jumping off the highway. Cruz lands perfectly fine, while McQueen lands backwards in front of a moving truck, and he starts driving backwards to avoid it. The cops try once again to launch a speed trap on the two, but it misses, and McQueen and Cruz successfully escape the cops. So, now that we have a play-by-play of how the scene goes, what exactly does it add to what we already know? Cruz is depicted as being cocky and a skilled driver in this scene, the complete opposite of herself at the beginning of the final film, confirming my theory that cocky, headstrong Cruz originated from this version of Cars 3. But the most significant piece of information would have to be this warning sign of McQueen and Cruz. The images of the sign show them looking all edgy with mean faces. McQueen even has a scar on his left cheek. Watching the scene though, McQueen and Cruz don't look like this at all outside of this one shot, which means two things. Either McQueen and Cruz committed a crime while at a costume party, or the more likely option, these two cars aren't McQueen and Cruz. We already know that this version of the movie would have been focused on an identity theft storyline, so I think that it's very likely that these are actually two criminals that framed them for a pretty severe crime, judging by the amount of police cars chasing McQueen and Cruz, as well as the helicopters dropping speed traps to stop them. Add that to the list and we now have every public piece of information on this version of Cars 3. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, let's take that information and piece it together to figure out what the plot of this movie would have been like from beginning to end. Keep in mind, this part of the video is completely speculation, but after seeing all these interviews, concept art, and storyboards, I think it's pretty close to what the movie was actually about. Now, without further ado, this is the original version of Cars 3. Due to unknown circumstances, most likely his career as a superstar athlete, Lightning McQueen finds himself in California going to celebrity parties, where he meets characters such as the DeLorean from Back to the Future and Batman. Okay. He also meets Cruz Ramirez, an up-and-coming race car who's just like McQueen at the beginning of the first Cars. Extremely talented, but cocky and self-centered, which causes her to get on McQueen's nerves very easily. Two criminals frame McQueen and Cruz for a serious crime, which leads to the two being a part of a massive police chase that they're barely able to escape from. The middle chunk of the movie would have had McQueen and Cruz trying to clear their names, and while we don't know the specifics of what exactly would have gone down, we do know two locations they would have come across, which were a dry desert filled with race cars and California's Route 99. During this middle chunk of the movie, Cruz would have slowly learned the error of their ways, having a similar character arc to Lightning in Cars 1, and McQueen would slowly start warming up to Cruz, with the two forming a mentor-student bond. Eventually, McQueen and Cruz are successful in clearing their names, causing the actual wrongdoers to get punished for their crimes. And the movie would have ended, likely the exact same way as the final film, with McQueen deciding to become Cruz's mentor and crew chief. So, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts about this version of the movie in the comments below. As for me, I think it's kind of mid. There are definitely some aspects of it that I like, such as the desert that eventually became the salt flats and Cars on the Road, or Route 99 being a prominent location. I think exploring other highways like Route 66 is a pretty good idea for a sequel to Cars, and I'd like to see the concept revisited in a future project, because Lord knows Disney is never going to let this franchise die. But besides those two things, I don't really vibe with this version of Cars 3. Cruz being the exact same as McQueen when he was a rookie makes her a way less interesting and boring character, since we already know exactly how her story is going to play out. Basically makes her nothing more than Lightning McQueen, but girl. The SoCal stuff seems like it would have been done just to shove in cameos, and the identity theft storyline, well, fine I guess, it's not jumping the shark like Cars 2 did. Still leans too much into the thriller genre, and is, in my opinion, a way less interesting conflict than McQueen's struggle to keep up with the next-gen racers in the final film. This version of Cars 3 probably would have been fine, but it feels like a pretty unnecessary cash grab, and I'm glad Pixar realized this too, and reworked it into the movie we have now. That's it for the video. In case you want to fact check me, my sources will be in the description. Special thanks to Cool Cars for bringing these storyboards to light. This video wouldn't have been possible without you. And if you liked the video, stick around, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. That's it for now. See ya.